welcome to the show. Ashley, we talked with Dan Lindsey, who founded the Broker Carrier Summit a few years back, about what the event is. And essentially, if you missed that, please go back and listen, first of all. But essentially what it is he got tired of hearing all of the complaining and
from both sides
between brokers and carriers, saw a clear divide there between what they were looking for and what they are doing, and thought, I'm going to start this summit. I'm going to bring both sides together to have a dialogue, have a conversation, a novel concept, I know, in this day and age of social media. But the idea really has taken off, and they're doing a really cool thing here. They had their summit recently in Orlando, Florida. Lewie Pugh, OOIDA Executive Vice President, was there among many other people, giving the trucker side of things. Dan Lindsey giving the broker side of things. They had a conversation on stage. We're going to have a conversation here in the studio between the two of them to talk about what they talked about and find out if they have solved all of our problems. So
fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. Let's have a listen. All right, Dan. So last time we talked to you a few weeks ago, you were preparing for the Broker Carrier Summit. It is now over. Have you gotten some rest?
Not yet.
No?
I'm hoping to in the coming days.
Yeah. Everything go well, though?
Everything went fantastically. Lot of great feedback. We've been getting the same feedback as we've been getting for the last couple of years, is that the industry has needed this for such a long time. And so everyone is extremely excited about seeing brokers, carriers, drivers, even tech companies and platforms coming together to solve problems and not point fingers at the other side. So that's been encouraging.
Yeah. And Lewie, this was, I believe, was this your first time going to the Broker Carrier Summit?
Yeah, it was my first time.
Yeah, impressions?
They always plan it when I can't come.
By design?
Yeah, probably.
You want
You
want to raise that with Dan right now? Dan?
In our defense, Louis' schedule is not the most easily to predict.
Yeah, that's true.
That is true. Yeah, all right. We'll give the point to you there, Dan. You win that one. But Lewie, your impressions of the event, obviously you knew what you were going to there in Orlando, but what did you think of the event?
I think it was a great event. I mean, it was very nice. It was very nicely done. Everybody was very kind and welcoming. Lots of folks had a lot of good questions and stuff. It's like any of these things. You get to sit up on stage. I do appreciate the fact that I got to go first on the morning I was there, because they kind of, when you go to these things and people don't really know who you are, they're not really sure how they should talk to you or nothing. I think it's a nice icebreaker to be able to go in there first thing in the morning, talk about what Dan and I talked about, which was very constructive. And then it kind of opened the door for other people throughout the day just to come up and say, hey, I heard you, or hey, this, or hey, that. So, because, that's the thing with these conferences. You get a lot of good things out of what they present, but then you get a lot of good things out of just, the water cooler talk, for lack of better terms. Networking, I guess, is the official term.
Yeah.
Now,
That's
Dan, like we said, we spoke with you a couple weeks ago ahead of the event. You'd mentioned then that, this idea for this event was born out of frustration, that you were tired of hearing brokers and carriers kind of snipping at each other. So you decided to get them all together to hash out their differences. I'm curious, was there any spirited discussions this time around?
From what I took away, there are always spirited discussions. Unfortunately, I'm rarely in the room when they happen because I'm running around like a chicken with my head cut off the entire week. But there were a couple of discussions. We tried to actually spur one on at that first session that Lewie and I were in. He dropped the transparency word, hoping to kind of get some reaction from the crowd. And I think we got a couple of responses, but nothing. That's one of the things that's unique about BCS, is that the spirited conversations happen, and then after the session is over, the people who you saw having that spirited conversation are laughing and joking and shaking hands and becoming closer colleagues and closer friends. So it's a really encouraging environment.
Let's talk about it, Lewie, because you sat down with Dan on stage there and had a discussion, and obviously the idea being Dan kind of, coming from the broker side of things, obviously you looking more at the carrier side of things and the frustrations that the carriers have with the current structure and the way things are. Transparency, Dan, you mentioned it there. And that's something that OOIDA continues to push for, right? And we talked to you about this last time, Dan, broker transparency and getting more transparency out there. And that's something OOIDA feels strongly about. Walk us through that discussion, Lewie, if you could, and kind of where you were coming from. And Dan, we'll let you kind of go after Lewie talks here.
Yeah, we talked for a little bit already. We were up on stage and talked for a little bit, and people were, like I said, it was very good. Dan had very good questions and conversation, good back and forth, and but I was at another broker event earlier in the year, and I know that was a big thing that was on people's minds, but that was like sort of taboo nobody was supposed to ask.
The four-letter, the T word?
Yeah, the T word.
It's like the four-letter word that you can't...
Yeah. The four-letter plus.
Yeah, however many letters that
But
is,
anyway, so, I know there's lots of people here, and I figure, I'm not ashamed of it. We're not ashamed of it. We're pushing it for a reason because our members need it. Our members want it. So I think there gets to be a lot of misinformation out there about why or what we do. And I think there's people out there, of course, I would say probably people who aren't doing the right thing, that they're really trying to switch the narrative of why OOIDA is doing this or wants this. So I just in the conversation, I said, one thing I'd like to touch on is the 300-pound gorilla here in the room. I'm sure everybody wants to know broker transparency. And I just said we're the ones who petitioned for it. I'm sure you all know that. And here is why. And explaining to it why, I said it doesn't have really anything to do with rates. I know that's what is continually gets pushed upon us, is that, OOIDA is doing this, so the carrier gets the rates and can, go underbid us or whatever. And I'm like, no, this is more because of after the load's delivered.
Yep.
As you all know, and probably most of our listeners know, we have such a problem and such an issue when there's a claim on a certain load and there's never been any documentation prior to that. The trucker had a clean bill of lading, and then all of a sudden there's either a claim or a bunch of these, bullshit fees or something gets on that the driver knew nothing about or was told not. And then when we ask for proof, we're always told, well, we don't have to show you because you waived your right to 371.3. And I said, that's where this is coming from.
Yeah.
So I think that opened some people's eyes. I think some people heard that for the first time. I'd say probably a lot of people because, like I said, nothing against the broker world, but from their side of the world, all this has ever been about is truckers trying to get to rates and either, like I said, go behind their backs and solicit their freight at a lower rate or whatever. That's what everybody's screaming about, but when that's not really it at all.
Yeah, and Lewie, I was one of the people in the room who learned and heard that for the first time.
Is that right?
I think I mentioned that on stage because, as a broker, when we hear about transparency, we are thinking, oh, drivers want our rates, carriers want our rates, because then they have the power to go and back solicit us to the shippers, right? And that's a legitimate fear, I guess. But the way you described it there, with wanting to know specifically about accessorials, claims, the additional fees that are being added on to by brokers. I think there's a legitimate case, 100% legitimate case for transparency in those 100%.
And that's the idea of what you're doing. I mean, you're trying to do there, Dan, right? Is have these discussions because sounds like you learned something from Lewie making his case there.
100%. And that's why I was excited to have Lewie first, to have OOIDA there. That's one of the reasons why I decided to put that in the first session. First session out the gate. The Broker Carrier Summit was founded on having the hard conversations in a constructive and a productive way. Like Lewie mentioned, he was at a conference earlier on this year where you didn't bring up transparency. There is nothing that you cannot bring up at BCS. If there is an issue in the trucking industry, an issue in the freight world that affects the quality of life and the profitability and productivity of the companies and the people that work in the industry, we want to talk about it. Not only do we want to talk about it, we want to help be part of the solution to fixing the problems. That's why we're here. And so I was super excited to have that conversation with Lewie.
Well, that strikes me too, because If you are, or were, I should say, kind of misunderstanding OOIDA stance and what Lewie was looking for in terms of broker transparency, you are not alone. I mean, I'm sure that the majority of people out there who thought what you thought what they thought, if that made any sense whatsoever.
A lot of thinking going on here, boy. My head's starting to hurt.
Too much thinking.
Who's thinking what now? I don't even know.
Yeah, there you go.
Who's on first?
What's on second? But yeah, I mean, that speaks volumes, because I mean, you're not the only one misinterpreting that. And that means a lot, I would imagine, moving forward.
Well, I would say, yeah. I mean, here's Dan, who runs this whole deal.
Yeah.
So he's tuned in and he's educated. He knows what's going on in the industry. It's not like he's not paying attention. He's a guy who's paying very good attention.
Yeah.
But he didn't know this. So that's my point. On that side of the world, it's completely talked about. And, I just want to say, because, we've posted some stuff on social, and we get, you always get the haters and people, everybody, the brokers, blah, 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 selling out of brokers. This isn't about selling out to anybody. Here's the facts. Whether if you're a trucking company, you're going to have to use brokers probably sometime in your life. It's just a fact. Whether you want to or not. There's a lot of truckers, that's all they use. But we have to use brokers. They're a necessity. On the broker side, you have the certain brokers that probably think that they're selling out by having us there. And why are you bringing these people who are trying to hurt us and all? But again, the brokers all need truckers. Mm-hmm. And as Dan said, we need to quit being adversaries, and we need to figure out a way to get along. And I think there's a lot of good. I know there's a lot of good trucking companies. I know there's a lot of good brokers. It's a matter of getting the good ones together and getting rid of the bad ones on both sides. Because the bad ones, that 10% or 5% or 1%, whatever, that's what spoils the batter, for lack of better terms. And things like this, like what Dan and they're doing with the Broker Care Summit, is bringing everybody to talk about their things. And you may walk away and not completely agree, but at least you're getting context, you're getting real ideas, and you're getting time to think. Everybody's getting time to think about what's being said.
Yeah.
Right. I was asked a couple of months ago what the most important technological development will be in the freight world in the next year. And my answer was and is the coffee cup. Because until we get people in the same room over a cup of coffee, over a beer, whatever it might be, over a meal, we are going to stay in our echo chambers. We're going to continue screaming at the sky. We're going to continue to rant and rave on Facebook or social media or whatever. And none of those things actually does a single thing to solve the problems that we're all encountering on a daily basis. What does solve the problem is literally sitting across the table from a carrier who you may not understand. And even if you don't walk away as a broker with a carrier partner, at least you walk away with a higher and deeper level of understanding as to where they're coming from, which ironically does help you run your business better. And the same goes for carriers sitting across from brokers.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was said, we said it, Dan and I said, I don't know how many times in mine, and I was in another breakout session, it was brought up, and I heard it all over the building, or all over the event. Relationships. Somewhere in the last 5 to 10 years of technology advances is what I blame on it. We've gotten too reliant on technology and less reliant on knowing who we're talking to, know who we're working with, having those relationships. And we need to get back to that. And I noticed when I was sitting up on the stage with Dan and we would talk about that, there was a lot of heads nodding up and down in agreement that we've gotten too far. I mean, technology is a great tool and it's a great thing, but it still doesn't take the place of, knowing who you're working with. I mean, to me, that's why we have all this freight fraud issues now, because we got too reliant on technology and kind of took the people out of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Lewie, you mentioned being up on stage with Dan. You guys did a chat titled Building Trust with Owner-Operators, a candid conversation with OOIDA. I'm curious, what did you guys talk about?
Relationships, broker transparency. It talked about what's going on for owner-operators, what their needs are, their necessities, the importance of communication by both the carrier and the broker to one another. As I point back to technology, we all have a cell phone chained to us. I mean, it's a ball and chain now.
Yep.
So there's no reason ever that if you're a carrier and you have truck trouble or some freight or whatever, traffic, whatever, there's no reason why you can't call the broker and tell them. And same goes for the broker. If you find out there's going to be a problem with the load or already any kind of thing happens, don't let the trucker show up at the receiver and be surprised. Just pick up the phone and call them and try to work this out now. Talked about these charges, that's some of the things that irritate truckers a lot of times, because we see these charges. A truck broke down something, they get hit with a late delivery. I mean, hell, I've seen guys get hit with early delivery fines.
Yeah.
Work with, if this is a guy who's doing the right thing, bad thing, try to work with them. I'm sure there are contracts. I know there's contracts. I understand myself from the flatbed industry with cranes, and you're paying people to be there. I understand all that, but I find a hard time believing when you got to live frozen chickens on here and you're half a day late to a Walmart that it's really that big of a deal to anybody.
Yeah.
But try to work with truckers and treat them right. Know who you're working for, and kind of point it out from the small trucker, how trucking's changed. We don't have people who really want to be gone weeks at a time anymore. They like to have a normal life. So if you have some dedicated lanes, you can load somebody in and out. You find somebody, work with these people. Set them. Truckers like to know their week planned out as best they can.
Yeah, I think a lot of the big pieces that we talked about just boiled down to communication. Treating people like people. One of the questions that I asked Lewie was, what are some ways in which drivers can build trust with brokers? And then we flipped it around and asked, what are some of the ways from the feedback you guys get from drivers and carriers that brokers can rebuild or build trust with the carriers and the drivers? All of it revolved around communication. And to Lewie's point, I think a lot of that goes to the trend in the last few years, specifically, of relegating relationships to technology as opposed to building the technology to enhance relationships. I think that piece is one that we're going to have to really dial in as an industry and figure out how to balance those two, because at the end of the day, people, whether they're a driver, a dispatcher, a broker, a carrier, salesperson, whoever you are, when you get on the phone, you want to make sure you're talking to a person, and you want to make sure you're talking to the right person, and you want to make sure the right person you're talking to has all the right information. You don't want to talk to a machine or a robot. So I think communication, the big takeaway for me was communication still needs a lot of improvement.
Let me ask you this, Dan, because, clearly you got a lot from your conversation with Lewie, and Lewie, I know you got a lot from your conversation with Dan and all the other conversations that were had there at the summit. From a practical standpoint, though, Dan, I'm wondering, just from your talk with Lewie on that stage, the people listening, you saw some heads nodding in agreement. What are you hoping that they do, the brokers? Let's kind of focus on them if we could. What are you hoping that they do when they go back home and start working their everyday again? What lessons are you hoping that they took with them that, again, as you talk about improving these relationships, what is that going to look like for them on an everyday basis?
Yeah, I hope it changes the how and why with every conversation they have with a carrier and a driver. I hope they take away the lessons, the points, the perspectives that they got at BCS, and they take it back to their workplaces and they incorporate it in every single conversation. In fact, we've seen that. That's one of the reasons why the BCS is expanding our event footprint starting next year in the industry, we're starting an event company called Catalyst. So each of our events are going to be a Catalyst event, because what we've seen from these conferences, from these summits, is that the lessons that are learned at the BCS catalyze into action in companies and in individuals, and it changes the relationship between companies and the relationship between brokers and carriers with every single phone call, every single email. That's what I hope you take away.
Lewie, I guess on the flip side of that, we could ask you, what message you would take to owner-operators, carriers out there who are dealing with brokers. Obviously, communication is a big part of it. Have those conversations, but what else did you take away that you're going to kind of relay to people out there?
Yeah, I mean, I continue to tell, like I said, truckers and whatever, that, brokers have to make a living too.
Yeah.
Probably in this down market, they're not stealing off the top of you like that you think they are. I mean, it's pretty easy to see that rate trends are. There are good brokers out there. Know the brokers you work for. Don't make promises you can't keep. Don't, if you're taking a load, and make sure that you can meet all the requirements and do it. Don't, if there is a problem, things go sideways or whatever, because things happen, don't be the person who makes that broker lose their freight or lose that contract because of some idiot on the loading dock who maybe just doesn't have anything.
Yeah.
He doesn't have anything to do with anything. He's just having a bad day or whatever. He's picking on you or done like whatever his problem is. Call the broker and let the broker get a hold of his boss, whoever's boss, to remedy the situation. Take your frustration, your anger out on the broker, not the people at the freight. It's the broker's freight. It's his responsibility or her responsibility to call this shipper or this receiver and fix the problem. So, yeah.
Can we go back? And I've spelled it out. There are 12 letters in transparency. So it's the 12-letter word that should not be spoken. But with regard to transparency,
it's a 4-syllable word.
Yeah, thank you. There you go. I knew you had my back, Dan.
I got you.
But with regard, if we can just go back to transparency for a second, because it is such an important issue, again, for OOIDA and so many people out there. Knowing what you know now and kind of what OOIDA is pushing for, do you see a world in which you could almost lend support to OOIDA's efforts here in getting more transparency? Do you see a role there for yourself and for other, brokers that are out there?
I think as long as we come to a closer understanding as to what the other side is saying, I think absolutely there is. Because here's what I've learned after 3 years of doing these events. More often than not, brokers and carriers are saying the same thing. We're just speaking a different language. And I think the more often we come together, the more synergies that we come to understand exist between the two sides. And so I think the more conversations we have, the more opportunities we have to get both sides in the room and actually having a productive discussion as to what the desired outcomes look like, I think absolutely there is. And I think the more leaders in the brokerage side of the world and the carrier side of the world that are able to participate in that, I think they would say that too.
Yeah. Lewie, you agree?
Yeah, I agree 100%. I mean, I think the biggest thing we all need to be working on the broker and trucker side together is raising the barrier of entry for trucking and for brokerages. It's far too easy to be either one. Mm-hmm. And that's another reason we're having all these fraud issues and stuff that we've been combating now for the last 2 or 3 years. It's too easy.
Yeah.
And we got to, FMCSA, DOT, they've got to come down on this and raise that barrier of entry to where just not anybody and everybody can set up a brokerage or a trucking company or whatever. Plus, make it harder to steal people's information would be helpful as well.
That sounds nice.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I think to that point, if there is an issue that everyone in the freight world, the freight industry can come around, I think it's that. Because I don't know of a single brokerage who's worth their salt, or a single carrier or driver who's worth their salt, who would not say the same thing that Lewie just said. The barrier to entry is too low. The requirements for learning and knowledge of the industry is way too low to get into the industry. There needs to be some kind of training, some kind of, I don't know if it needs to be centralized, but it needs to be regulated. It needs to be monitored in some way so that we know that, for instance, all these people who are getting these CDLs from these CDL mills who are all fraudulent, there has to be a way to police that. And the same for brokerages. We have to know that the brokers that are brokering freight know the regulations as well as the carriers, if not better.
Yeah.
So I think that's a no-brainer. That's a win-win.
It is. And I'm wondering too, you have this one event in Orlando where you guys are talking, and I know, again, there were many discussions elsewhere and other, back and forths here and there. But is there a place, Lewie and Dan, where you all are kind of communicating throughout the rest of the year to make sure that line of communication is open and that you're on the same page and that you're understanding where you're coming from? Is that something in the cards, maybe?
I mean, on my end, there's not really anything you can point at. I think the biggest thing you take away is you build relationships, and there probably is a way to do that in the future. I'm not a tech guy, so I'm the wrong guy to ask.
Yeah.
And then I'm also a person who doesn't really get involved in those tech kind of thing, those
Sure.
conversations like that, because you never know. It feels like you always get that one lawyer who isn't a lawyer. But anyway, with that being said, I think what you get is the community, you get the connections, the contacts, and you make friendships, and then it kind of builds organically,
Yeah,
I mean,
that makes
this
sense.
person reaches out to you because of this person, or that this happens. So, well, I'll call this person because they'll have a better understanding.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think there absolutely is. Like I mentioned earlier, the BCS is expanding our event footprint. One of the things that we're doing is, I said this for a couple of years now, the future of logistics is partnership. The freight industry does not need just another event. What it needs is a different kind of community. And events can provide the opportunity to form that kind of community. So just like the Broker Carrier Summit is talking about issues between brokers and carriers and putting them together to do business and do deals, we have a cross-border connector event coming up in February. And the idea with that is connecting U.S.-based companies and Mexican-based companies on how to understand and facilitate cross-border freight in the future. How does it look? We're going to be talking about things like customs processes and documentation. We're going to be talking about ELP and visa programs. We're going to be, again, having the hard conversations. And we had a little teaser preview of it this week at BCS, where I talked with Enrique Bello of Grupo On Time about that very thing. And so we're going to continue having the hard conversations, and we invite anyone who is not afraid of having those hard conversations to all the events that we put on and to join in the community.
It sounds like a great event, and we talked to you last time before this latest one, and it was clear that you've got a vision and a plan for getting everybody together and, again, communicating, which we tip our cap to you for that, Dan.
Yeah.
Great job. Lewie, decent job. Just kidding. Great job as always. But, Dan, we appreciate your time. Lewie, we always appreciate yours, and we'll keep in touch.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you. And thanks for having me, Dan. I appreciate it. And thanks to all you truckers out there. Appreciate what you do.
Always a pleasure, Louis.
Thanks for listening. Today's episode of Trucking with OOIDA was brought to you by a dedicated team of people. That includes Jim Fetzer, Tennille Flick, and Kim Boren.
You can listen to new episodes and extended interviews on your favorite podcast platform and on the OOIDA YouTube page. Please subscribe while you're there. If you've got thoughts, we'd love to hear them. Call us at 1-800-324-6856 and leave a message, or send us an email to podcast@ooida.com, and we might include it on the show.